Welcome to another episode of Artist Spotlight, the podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Stringer. As always, the podcast brought to you by your friends at the Maryland Photography Alliance, and you can check out everything they have going on online at mdphotoalliance.org. There's information about events and contests and just a lot that can help photographers learn and grow their craft and increase the interest and find ways to meet like-minded people and get out there and do what we all do and what we love to do. And of course, that's photography. On this episode, I am joined by New York-based photographer Kat Byrnes, and she's got a new book out, which I had a chance to spend several days with. It's really phenomenal, and so we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff, and so with that, let me welcome Kat Byrnes to the podcast.
Hey, Mitch. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Good morning. So maybe let's just use that as a jumping off point. So your book, Girl World, very, very recently released, or as they say in the music world, just dropped. So that's out, and incredible book. I mean, the way I looked at it as almost, and I'm not a woman, but almost like a day in the life or a life just of women, of women of every age, of every ethnicity, of every socioeconomic background. It was just like a real world snapshot. That's my take, but better to ask the author and the photographer. What was your thought in developing the book?
Thank you for acknowledging the book as it exists, you know. And you're right, though. It is like that was honestly my thought through the whole curation of it. I had gone through so many drafts. It took me 4 years to finalize the final draft. And it really turned into this like almost encyclopedia of this like slice of life of how I see the world, but also what I wanted to focus on. And the subject matter was specifically women, just centralizing them, all ages, all different type of female identifying people, and just like, I mean, it's an archive of 10 years of my work, so most of it is not thought through in the sense of I had this book in mind. It was just me already taking photos and kind of working with what I had, and then kind of filling in spots that I felt like were missing. But it really is this like, I really wanted to capture the essence of what it's like being a woman.
Well, and what I found, I should say, one of the things I found interesting is, there's the expression "people are people," and you could take that further to "people are people" wherever you go, and eventually you've got song lyrics. But what I noticed is in some of your photographs, especially of girls, just young girls on the street, just being girls, the way they kind of look at each other, the fun they're having together, the silliness and all that kind of stuff, whether you're photographing in New York City or you're photographing in Havana, Cuba, or in Paris, France, or in Tanzania. These are how kids interact. And so while, much of this is based in New York and some in Pennsylvania, and it didn't matter in the sense that this is the experience, it seems, of women wherever they are. And that kind of resonated with me. And I think that, as a viewer, especially, a female viewer, you could look at it and say, yep, been there. I've made that expression. I felt that way. So I thought, whether it's, whoever's looking at this book, I think it was incredibly relatable. And is what kind of feedback are you getting from people who were, looking at the book for the very first time?
I guess awe, surprise. I think a lot of people don't expect this from me, which I think is also very fascinating, because I see this within myself. I believe in myself. I have 10 plus books in my head, and this was the first one I decided to come out with because I thought it was very important. Like I made this book happen because I felt like it should have came out yesterday or last week. So or last year, you know, so I felt like this like representation really mattered, and it still matters. And so when I see people look through it, it's surprising. It gives it fresh eyes. You know, I've been looking at these photos for so long that I almost have, I guess I'm just used to seeing these images. So to see it in fresh eyes, it gives it kind of like a new fun perspective. And I see this book now like I'm done. I'm done here. It's for other people to connect with. And that's, I think, why I shoot photography, right? Is to make it for myself as this own kind of like self-expression, but also a way to connect with like the human condition, no matter who you are, no matter what you are. It's something that I have always been, you know, I have only ever lived this experience. So why not share with everyone what that's like through my eyes?
I had a book published a couple years ago on my Cuba photography, and
Mm-hmm.
I, to kind of pick up on what you said, I lived with
Yeah.
the photos in that
Mm-hmm.
development for quite some
Yeah.
time. And then, you kind of get to a point where, you want it to be well done, but you want it to be done. and
Yeah.
and then you
Yeah.
see people look at it and their reaction, and maybe you can kind of to share to people who are listening what it's like to
Mm-hmm.
live with this project and then
Mm-hmm.
put it out in the world and kind of see like the
Mm-hmm.
life that it takes on at that point, because it's your baby but it's out there at that point.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like, oh my gosh, look, it can walk, it can
Mm-hmm.
talk. People,
Yeah.
how does that kind of feel when you see people picking it up off a stack and they want to buy one, or they want you to sign it, or
Mm-hmm.
they're just laughing as they flip the pages? I mean, how does that feel
Mm-hmm.
inside for you?
It's like a dream come true, you know, but it's also like materializing what I've always known what will happen. So, it just feels like, all right, this is reality now. And maybe it hasn't really sunk in yet, but I'm just like on to the next. So to me, it's just thrilling. You know, brings me happiness seeing people look through it and acknowledge like how much hard work has gone into it. Yeah, it's nice. It's so nice to like watch people look through it. I mean, you know, it's just also um seeing people interact with your photos when they're like printed frames hanging on the wall or like a painting. It's like you allow this space for their own interaction with it. And I think that's really important too. So, yeah. And I think it's just so new. Like, I just released the book on the 22nd of March. And so it is very, very fresh. So I'm still in the works of publicizing, marketing, you know, this and that, book signings, and I'm almost sold out. So that's very cool to have a book almost sold out in like less than a month being released. So
That's
yeah,
amazing. Congratulations.
yeah,
That is no
mm-hmm,
small feat, especially,
mm-hmm,
in
yeah,
a business that is so subjective. You know what
yeah,
what one person likes, the other person is just like, so to have,
mm-hmm,
a number of people who are really connecting with it in such a short period of time, that's
yeah,
pretty great. That's really great.
mm-hmm, yeah. I'm very proud.
So let's kind of go back a little bit. So you're
Mm-hmm,
born in Kingston, Pennsylvania,
mm-hmm,
and I'm sure, within 6 months of being born, you think, you know what, I'm going to publish a book called Girl World, when I'm an adult, and you probably locked that in and started shooting at around 6 months. If you didn't actually do that, when is like the first time that you can remember interacting with a camera?
Oh my God. I guess like disposables in high
Any kind.
school.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I would play with like digicams in like elementary school. Like my mom had this little Nikon digital cam, and like my best friend and I would do like videos and stuff like that and just kind of have fun. And then when I got older, it became like disposable cameras at like parties and hanging out with friends. And then I just didn't think anything of it of like keeping the negatives, you know, it was just all about prints. But yeah, like I grew up in a family of artists. education and kind of like being immersed in the art worlds was exposed to me right out, you literally right out of the womb. Both my parents are painters, so just growing up, well versed and always kind of having conversations about composition and methods and art history always is like, and still is, I hold very close to my heart, and I still share those conversations with them. So it did come from like an early age, even if it wasn't a camera as a tool, but even just speaking of art
Now
in life.
you end up heading to Pace University where you're studying
Mm-hmm.
photography, you're studying painting. How did you
Mm-hmm.
choose Pace to go to?
So I was born in Pennsylvania, but I was raised in Pennsylvania as well, but also raised in the city, in New York
Okay.
City. And so I always had this, connection to New York, and also understanding that this is where art is, this is where the hub of creatives, it fosters this like art community. Yeah, I chose Pace actually because I I got a tennis scholarship. I was
Okay.
very athletic in high school. I played three sports. I got a tennis scholarship at Pace. It gave me the most money for my tuition. And I had first started at the Westchester campus. I took one ceramics class, and I said, this is it. I just want to create art for the rest of my life. And then from there, I transferred to the city campus, which is in a financial district in
Mhm.
Manhattan. And yeah, I took my first like 101 photo class in the dark room. And it's just, that's where it all happened, you know. I just could never get out of the dark room ever since.
I mean, when I go to New York City, where I try to get up to for just any number of reasons, probably five-ish times a year, and
Mm-hmm.
now more so than years ago. But there's something about, for me, the pace of the city that
Mm-hmm.
whatever mood I'm in, when I either park my car or if I take the train up, like the minute I'm up
Mm-hmm.
on the street, every sense is like on overdrive. I love it. I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely
Mm-hmm.
love it. I
Yeah.
can walk the streets from morning till night and just with the
Yeah.
camera. And as a young person growing up there, you probably haven't known a lot different than that. So as a person who lives there,
Mm-hmm.
when you walk out in the morning to start your day, what does that pace do for you, just energy wise and creativity wise?
I mean, you're so right. Like the city just feeds on energy, and I think it can be exhausting. So I think it is also, a point of acknowledging it. The city is an amazing place to create and go, go, go. But I think it's really important to also leave and take a moment and ground yourself. And then you can come back because it'll always be here. So for me, it has always been familiar to me, but it has changed so much over the years. And it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing. So even the familiar places have shifted a bit. So it is also beautiful to kind of be a part of this like ever changing city as I'm changing too. And yeah, it is like, it's just, I think pick up and go. So being a photographer in the city, there's always something, and there's never an excuse to not create and not shoot. If anything, that's a reflection on, your energy levels. And that's when you have to kind of like decide, hey, do I have the capacity to do this today? Or do I have the capacity to approach this subject or get into this? And then you make those executive decisions.
And the things, the things you see in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
it's some of them are head shaking. Some of
Mm-hmm.
them are, beautiful. Some of them are just, kind of awe-inspiring, but it's all going on simultaneous. And, what would you say, if you can think of anything that you used to kind of recognize or see when you were younger, but 10 years later, you don't see that anymore, or that has changed. It's not quite the same as it used to be. And any of those sort of, particular things around the city that are different now?
That's a really good question. It's hard to say. I mean, technology has changed. So a lot of this like accessibility of like whether it be charging stations or people on their cell phones or people plugged in, I think there's a little bit more of this like insular bubbles that people are living in versus kind of always everyone being on the same plane,
Hmm.
if you will. So people are less likely if you even just say, hey, try to interact with someone. Sometimes they are not even listening to you because they are plugged in, they have their headphones in, or they're talking to someone else. So I think that is definitely something I notice a lot, as well as just like architecture. Like architecture has changed a lot. Everything is glass, everything is reflective. So in terms of light and shadow and things like that, like I've never seen so much reflective blocks before in my life. So that is very fun to kind of take advantage of too. Although I have other opinions about contemporary architecture, it is an interesting thing to observe.
Yeah, I know for me, for example, some of the old stores and the
Mm-hmm.
storefronts that were,
Yeah.
kind of iconic are,
Mm-hmm.
now becoming, dispensaries, or they're becoming
Mm-hmm.
mattress stores, or, whatever it is, but
Yeah.
it loses that. And I think that, there was a point when, you had people who, as you said, they were not so insular and they were interacting. And now there's a
Mm-hmm.
certain degree of coexisting. You're in the same space, but the
Mm-hmm.
interactions are diminished because of what we're saying. People put on
Mm-hmm.
their earphones, and they're,
Yeah.
in whatever world that, that they're in. But I guess in some degrees it's progress, and in some degrees maybe not as much. So when you're
Mhm.
on a day off and you
Mhm.
set off with your camera,
Mhm.
you know are you a person who's gonna just have your camera on you all the time, and when you're out at lunch you may shoot something? Or do you kind of plan like a day? I'm getting up, I'm having a coffee
Mhm.
or whatever you choose, and I'm out for the day or half the day shooting. How do you kind of set aside time, or do you set aside time specifically for photography?
I just have my camera on me at all times. I don't really say, I'm gonna go out and shoot today. I'm like, maybe I used to do that when I was younger, but now I'm to the point of just like, on my day off, I have like things to do.
Mhm.
I have errands. I take my camera, and those end up being like my best photos. When I'm unintentional, going about my day, doing the things that I need to do. And then I cross paths with people that I wouldn't have necessarily would have if I intentionally did that. So I just kind of like go about my, intuitive pace. I think that's just a real important, I guess, workflow that I have. And also just like my own vision of what I think, why I use a camera as a tool to express myself.
In the book, you're showing people, either individuals or groups of people interacting or
Mm-hmm.
reacting to different things. So there's
Mm-hmm.
always the question in street photography or photographing people is, do you ask permission? Do you not ask permission? When do
Mm-hmm.
you ask permission? What happens if you don't, and the person kind of gets upset about it? So how do you kind of handle that street photography, thought process about how to go about it when you're talking about people?
Mm-hmm. I love this question so much. I never ask people. Like the best photos ever taken in the history of photography in terms of street documentary, most of the time, you're not asking for permission before you take the photo. You might have a conversation afterwards. Walk of how I like to take photos, it's maybe like a 2% times that I'll ask for permission, and usually that photo ends up being really bad because it's just not the way I saw it. It's
It's
not the way I saw
posed.
the
It's kind of
situation.
posed, right?
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with posed photos, and there's maybe two photos in this whole book of girl worlds that are actually me being like, all right, I'm going to set up the scene right now. But on average of how I go about taking photos, I will just very much just go about, take a photo. People have had issues. Some people, there's this like nonverbal consent. There's sometimes, a disagreement, and sometimes there's harassment, sometimes there's violence. So I think there's so many experiences that I've had that no matter what, no matter how many times people yell at me, it keeps me going. It's like this. I mean, I guess it could be called just like an adrenaline rush. People are so hyper aware of their presence online or camera in general. Cameras on your phone, cameras on your laptop, cameras on the street, surveying all the time. There is no privacy anymore anywhere. The moment you walk out into the streets, you are acknowledging the fact to be photographed. And that is a law. That is just baseline. And no one on the street wants to be educated. Those conversations don't need to be had, but I have ways to get out of disagreements and issues. And when people are not really agreeing with my practice as an artist.
In decades of doing street photography, only one time have I ever been run up on, and it was actually in New York City. I was photographing a guy across the street from where Photographiska used to be before they closed that. And this guy just came running up on me and just yelling and everything else. Meanwhile, I wasn't photographing him. I was photographing somebody else. And it was, but that's literally the only time that's ever happened. Because I have found, too, that culturally, different cities in the US, people are either more or less open to being photographed. I have found in different countries, in certain countries, people want to be photographed. I mean, I've photographed throughout India, and I have been asked by countless people to photograph them, their children. So, taking photos, that are not, permission is not asked, that's not a problem, because they love that you've done that. So have you done a lot or much of photography kind of outside of the US and experienced any of that, or not so much overseas?
Yeah, I've traveled to Mexico City and Thailand, and there's like a few of those images in the book as well. I did not have a problem in those cities. My publisher, Connotation Press, they're based out of Paris. She says this book would never happen in Paris.
Wow, that's interesting.
Legally, you need to ask for consent in France. So it is very fascinating to hear those kinds of differences in photography, and also just like we were saying, consent. But yeah, I've only had good experiences internationally, but then again, it's just like so many situations happen that like honestly it's hard to think about every little issue or problem that has ever arose from that. So but yeah, only good work has come from like traveling, honestly. I agree that like going somewhere else, a different language, a different culture, is clearly a photographer's candy. New, it's fresh, it's shiny. So of course those photos are gonna be fucking awesome, or not, I guess. I don't know. But I think it gets people excited again. And I necessarily don't need to travel to make good photos, I think, but it definitely gives you a fresh pair of eyes when you come back to the city that you're at or the town that you're living in. Kind of makes you see things fresh again in your like everyday life. I think that's also like maybe the point of traveling too, is you go somewhere, you maybe take things for granted that you would at home, and you come back in a new perspective.
Yeah, no, I agree. And sometimes I get, I don't know if it's an adrenaline boost or whatever it is, but sometimes I will get a new lens. And I am so excited just to see the world through that different lens, whether it's a different focal length, or maybe I'm shooting with an f2 and I'm shooting with an f1.2, and it just kind of, it's enough difference that you can make a difference in the photos. So when you're out there, and I always get asked this question, and you may get the question asked as well. From a
Mm-hmm.
gear perspective, do you have a go-to lens or lenses, or how do you kind of decide what you put on that camera when you head out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I kind of think of it as like home base. My gear is a 28 and my M6. I only ever shoot film, and yeah, my Elmarit is my go-to. I mean, recently I acquired a 21 just to go wider, have more fun. But I've been rocking a 28 since I'd say like 2016, maybe 2014.
And you said that you only shoot film.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask a very naive question that I've
Mhm.
asked people before, and I don't
Mhm.
have any particular sort of bent on this other than curiosity. So,
Mhm.
especially in present day with social media and the major role that it plays in promoting work and showing work and sharing work.
Mhm.
So, if you shoot with film with
Mhm.
the inherent limitations of 24, 36 exposures, some people would say, well, that's good. It's good to have limitations. It causes you to
Mhm.
have to focus and be more intentional. So
Mhm.
I sort of get that. So you create the image, you are going to have it developed, and then almost always those slides or those negatives will be scanned and essentially digitized so that things can be done with them. They can be posted or other means. So where I get
Mhm.
to is your thoughts around the look and feel of shooting in film
Mhm.
when, if my logic holds water, eventually they're going to become digitized versus just shooting digital to begin with. I think I may have a feeling for some of the thoughts, but they're your thoughts. So,
Mhm.
what is it that
Yeah.
kind of drives the film focus?
The look and feel. I mean, there's nothing like it. And why try to make it look like film? Just shoot film.
Yeah.
It's like just do the real thing. If you want it to, if you want to, if you're shooting digital and putting a film filter on it, sorry, but no, that's not me. Just do the real thing. And I guess that's also like kind of my own way of kind of working with, this tool is kind of also paying homage to the history of where it all started. That's very important to me and how I go about taking photographs. This element of surprise, this element of not knowing, and also this opportunity of other elements and things to intercede into your photographs that you wouldn't have planned, whether it be a light leak, a camera issue, happy accidents. There are all these things that can happen even in the dark room or the processing lab
Mhm.
out of your control. And then sometimes it damages your vision, but sometimes it makes it better, and you wouldn't ever have planned that otherwise. So I think there's this magic that I've seen time and time again in my own work that like you just can't make it up. It's just you allow it, you let go, and I think things will happen. And so allowing that space to just let film exist and kind of like have its own life too. Because
Mhm.
I think I'm very also interested in like the science of just the chemistry of it too. I used to be a lab tech for years, and so I think I'm very a hands-on person. So I like being hands-on from start to finish with anything, and I think film does that for me. Painting does that, drawing, something that has that like human touch to it. It just makes me more connected to my work.
I remember I took photography in college, and I just remember
Mhm.
going into the dark room and seeing this piece of paper suddenly turn into a photograph. And it's,
Mhm.
I mean, it's not magic, obviously, but, when you're watching it happen in front of you in that sort of weird red light inside of
Mhm.
a lab, it's sort of like, wow. And then you learn about
Yeah.
burning and dodging. And it's just, if for those who haven't done it doesn't mean that has to be all you do for people who are listening, but
Right.
I think you owe it to yourself if you've kind of
Mm-hmm.
grown up on digital, or haven't shot film in many many years, just to experience it at least once, and just kind of see the origins of this thing that we all really enjoy doing. It's pretty remarkable. And I think that nowadays, this is going to be like danger rant coming, but nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
where everybody who puts their pictures online is killing it and crushing it, and everybody's got 11 filters on a picture, and they're not even sure how
Mm-hmm.
that final image came to be. When you
Yeah.
take it back to its very essence, it's
Mm-hmm.
what is my f-stop, what is my shutter speed, what is my
Mm-hmm.
ISO, what is my composition, and then move to the developing. How am I developing,
Mm-hmm.
how long is it developing for, where am I burning, dodging? It's like that's kind of like the essence of
Mm-hmm.
photography. And I
Yeah.
think that it's been
It
very
is.
easy to get away from that, especially as specifically digital cameras have gotten so much better and so much more intuitive. I think it's taken a lot of the decision making and the differentiation away from the photographer. I mean, do you see that from a digital standpoint, that it's almost harder to determine who's a better photographer, like legitimately the brain of the photographer versus the gear doing a lot of the heavy lifting?
Yeah, I mean, it's so subjective, like I
Mhm.
have my thoughts on just process as an artist. I don't know. It's a hard one. I just think being hands-on with your work slows you down, and it just makes you a little bit more mindful of what you're doing this for. Why do you keep going? It's also this like practicing like not so immediate. Things don't have to be right now. Practice patience, and that I think is also this practice that moves farther and farther from just photography. This can be implemented every part of your life, is to not expect it right now, not expect the exact thing that you want. It's like, how about you would just allow it to happen? And I just think that that mindset is just so ingrained in myself that when I see people shooting photography and digital and doing filters like that, like you said, it's like teach their own. Like
Mhm.
I support people creating because I think it's the human condition to express that. And whatever tool you use, you do you. But for me, I think it's important to just like continue on the history of photography. I think it's so important to at least acknowledge where it all came from. And yeah, I can't imagine life without it. And I think I'm also really excited about like just this like film resurgence as well, to be living in a time where I'm constantly having conversations with people that are unaware of labs in New York.
Okay.
And I'm every day I'm giving people a list of photo labs to go to, or film stock, or talking about Kodak, or talking about Fujifilm, or just talking about just this like history of photography that continues on. And now we're in a new age. And that's really fascinating to be a part of.
Well, I was traveling with a guy years ago, and we got onto the subject of photo paper.
Mm-hmm.
And what I didn't realize, some, I don't know, 14 years, 15 years ago, was, and this is just so naive, but I'm happy to admit it, I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea how many different types of photo paper there are, and
Yeah.
how, depending upon whether your photos are black and white, or they're color, or what
Mm-hmm.
colors are in the photos, and just
Mm-hmm.
the gradations of gray and black and white in a black and white picture, like what paper may help accentuate that image better with one type than another, than another, than another. And I mean, I
Yeah.
got like a 3 day long tutorial about paper, but it is incredible. So whether it's film stock, or it's paper, or any of these other really important elements, it's almost endless, the number of
Mm-hmm.
rabbit holes you can go down to try to have, the cumulative knowledge result in you showing your images in the exact way you intended. It's, and
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's probably one of the reasons we all love this, because, you
Yeah.
can just get so absorbed by it. Have you gone
Yeah.
down the paper,
Yeah.
the photo paper rabbit hole yet, or?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think it's also just like the fun part about it too, like what you're saying. It's like you don't know until you try. Try a
Mhm.
glossy, try a very matte paper that's almost looking like a watercolor paper with a lot
Mhm.
of grit and texture. It's like you wouldn't even think about what it could look like until you see it. And that's just like also the beauty of like art making, right? Whether it's printing in the darkroom, inkjet printing, C printing, whatever it is. That's like the end goal. I always talk about too. Is it's one thing to take a photo, it's another thing to develop and scan it, but it's another to finalize it and put it on paper. Ink on paper is where it's meant to be. It's where it's meant to be living. And that's actually how I began curating Girl Worlds, is just by printing. I began printing photos again, specifically just photos that I thought were like all-star photos.
Mhm.
And I started to think, oh wow, these are telling a story. Let me curate a little selection of like what these are kind of tracking as a narrative. So there is power in printing. It's like writing. Putting pen to paper is powerful.
One
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I've thought about, I shoot a lot of editorial sports photography, and the
Mm-hmm.
number of photos that I create compared to the number that see the light of day, it's a very small proportion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's not my decision, that's editors' decisions, along the way. Some I agree with, some I don't, but that's okay. We each have our roles. But it got me thinking about where I get the greatest joy in photography,
Mm-hmm.
and that question is around, and I know the answer could ultimately be some of both, but do I get a greater joy out of seeing a really strong image printed, or do I get a greater joy out of the act of photography? Pushing the
Mm.
button, seeing the world around me, seeing the composition, pushing the shutter. Um, and I have to think that for me, given the percentage of snaps, I'll call it, that result in a
Yeah.
printed image, I'm snapping a lot more than I'm seeing a printed image. So by
Yeah.
just using math, I have to think maybe it's just the act of being out there doing it. But for you, where does that fall?
I say why does it have to be one or the other? You know?
Yeah.
And I love both. I love both differently.
Mhm.
Um, they are different practices and feelings and what it embodies altogether. I do not get an adrenaline rush when I print a print in my studio here and it's just me and I'm looking at it. It is not the same palpitations that I get. It is more of a secured feeling of, yeah, I knew this was gonna be good on paper, or it looks better than I even thought. Or, oh wow, I need to adjust it this way, or I need to adjust the color that way. There's a lot more methodical thoughts about being in the studio printing versus when you're taking photos. I don't think. I don't think like that. Like I'm just not the type to over stress about proper exposures, blurred images, out of focus. It's absolutely more spontaneous than methodical.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I
Yeah.
know that you've said that you appreciate the work of Jill Friedman and Vivian Meyer, and
Yeah.
two very different personalities, two very
Mhm.
very talented people, and just in this conversation, I almost feel like I can see a little bit of Jill Friedman in you, because
So, what a
she,
compliment. Thank you.
well, no, and I mean that very
Mhm.
sincerely, because she is, she was always a very determined person, no
Mhm.
nonsense, knew what she wanted to accomplish, knew what she was capable of. So,
Mhm.
for listeners who may not be aware of her work or Vivian's work, maybe if we start with Jill, what is it that you sort of appreciate about her work and maybe her way of going about it?
I think just her being a badass. She is just so cool to me in her photos, her series of she has this book called Jill's Dogs. She has a cops book where she just shadowed New York City cops.
That's an
Um,
intense series of pictures. That one, especially with the cops. Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
yeah. She has Circus Days, another book of hers, of just circus documentary stuff, and I think I just gravitate towards her work because she's just also leading a path for women during a time when, not given opportunities. So I think again, like representation matters, and I can't even say why I connect with her work other than the fact that like I connect with her work because of her composition, her method to her madness, her just, I think it's just everything about her work is just it's like this timestamp as well, which I love about certain eras of photography, and I think she captures that well, and also this sense of not only the expansiveness of her work, which is why I love her work is so much, is that it's just there's so many images of all different kinds of things. That she is not pigeonholed to one subject. It goes to the spanning of so many different kinds of lives and walks of life. And I only wish to do a whole body of work like that in my entire life as well, and also her just like creating work all the way until the end of her life, I think is inspirational, and I only hope to be like that, is like just like Martha Cooper, right? Like it's just someone that's been like making work, consistency, there's power within that too. It's just being consistent and believing in yourself, and yeah, people will catch on, and one could hope, but as long as you believe in yourself and you keep working, hopefully those opportunities are kind of presented to you, like Jill's opportunities to go into the circus and just hang out with them for like the whole tour, or same thing with like the cop series. Yeah, and also just there's just so much fun, her sense of like capturing youth as well is this
Mm-hmm.
thing that I think a lot of photographers gravitate towards, because everyone is always trying to like heal their inner child, and I think feed that inner child that everyone is the same always until the end of time. So I think that sense of her capturing youth is very influential on me.
Yeah, as you said, she could certainly be tough when she felt she needed to be, but then I've also seen where she lets her sensitive side very much
Yeah.
show, because
Yeah.
it's like she got, when she was in the moment to create the picture, she certainly could do it as well or better than anybody. But then when she would step away from that moment, she could, you could see the weight of what she was capturing sometimes
Mhm.
on her, but it didn't keep her from making that image. But
Yeah.
it certainly was impactful, especially when as you talked about, some of the cop stories
Yeah.
and photos,
Mhm.
and so she was quite literally out there on the street like Martha Cooper, creating the
Mhm.
photos,
Yeah.
and she was really very clearly respected by the first responders and really everybody who she was
Yeah.
working with, because she was right there. And then you have a different perspective, which I think some of the images do kind of remind me of some of the things from Girl World, and that's Vivian Meyer. So
Mhm.
Vivian's story, very different than
Mhm.
Jill's, as a nanny, and creating in many cases striking images while
Yeah.
watching kids. And now you could also say, how much watching kids was she doing with all the pictures that she was able to
Mhm.
create? But she's, her stuff. How would you sort of characterize Vivian Meyer's work? Because it really is, her eye was pretty incredible, I think.
It's like the unnoticed life, you know? It's like talking about someone who's persistent, consistent, and hopefully you get noticed and, you know, like Jill's work and people start commissioning you and things like that. But then there is the classic divide of the woman artist, the undiscovered, the the private life, undiscovered work until way later after she's passed.
Hmm.
Very stereotypical in women in art history. So to me, it's just another loss. Why this couldn't have been discovered earlier or given her the recognition earlier.
Yeah.
But I think it also kind of like, I hope, gives people an understanding of why some things should not go unrecognized. So yeah, her work is beautiful. It is the everyday life. It is the snapshot of a slice of life. And yeah, I mean, her color work is very beautiful. And I think, again, I think there is something very important as an artist to do it every day, no matter what kind of busy life you have, whatever job you have. You know, everyone has to pay the bills,
Hmm.
but what you do to kind of feed your soul is super important. And I could see that within her work.
Yeah, yeah, it's just it's remarkable, and
Yeah,
it would have been certainly better if she had been recognized for her incredible work in her lifetime. But
yeah.
absent that, it is a better late than never type thing. But certainly
Yeah.
would have been great. So let me
Mm-hmm.
ask you a nerdy camera question, and that or technique
Mm-hmm.
question, and that
Mm-hmm.
is zone focus or focus in the moment for the sub.
Why? Like, I don't get why. And you don't have to choose one. I can do both. I do both. I do both all the time.
Well, let me since I'm
Yeah.
learning that you are a
Mm-hmm.
person of why choose? Why is one better? Why does one
Yeah.
have to be worse? So let me
Mm-hmm.
ask you it this way, so I can get with the
Mm-hmm.
Jill Friedman / Kat Byrnes way of thinking, which is in what scenarios are you more likely to zone focus than focus in the moment?
When I have too much things in my hands, when I'm
Okay,
literally carrying groceries, I maybe I'm on the
okay,
phone, I have a drink or something, you know, things that I'm actually physically I can't move the focusing tab.
gotcha.
So I'm just like, all right, I'm at 8 feet, 12 feet. All right, I'm going to move appropriately for that, or I'll
Mhm.
just go for it and just shoot what I can, see what comes from it.
Yeah.
So yeah, zone focusing comes into play when I don't have the ability to actually move the focusing ring. And also, it is when I want to have fun and shoot from the hip and I don't want to look. Or I'm doing something like I'm at a weird angle and I just kind of like pop a few shots. And it also becomes this like extension of yourself that I'm not thinking about it as, oh, I'm focusing through the glass versus I'm just focusing through zone. I think it's just more like how I'm using the tool and what's going to come from that. So it's very interesting. I very much see the camera as like a utilitarian object in my
Hmm.
life. Like it's
Hmm.
just this like, all right, it's this like thing, this piece of metal and this piece of glass, and it's going to give me an end result of what I hope is a resemblance of what I experienced in this moment. And ends up being sometimes totally different. And then it's not until later you're like, oh, wow, I took this photo feeling this way at this time in space. But now that I'm sitting with the photo, it actually has way more meaning, has way more symbolic depth, maybe social, cultural context that I wasn't thinking about in that moment in time.
I can relate to that because
Mm-hmm.
a different version of that is when you hear a song, it's not just that song and that band or that artist, it's everything that was going on in your life at the time when you
Mm,
really remember first hearing that song. And for me, the
I
picture
love that
is
comparison.
oh, thank you. Yeah,
That's
it's the
great. Yeah.
picture is the pictures of whatever it is, but
Yeah.
what happened before you snap the picture, after you probably remember the morning of the day that you later made that picture. So yeah, no, I completely get that.
Yeah.
It's, I recently had, it was like an out of body experience in a sense where I was walking down the street, and a lady walked by me, an older lady, and whatever perfume she had was very reminiscent of a perfume that my grandmother used to wear.
Hmm.
And I wanted to just close my eyes and remember my grandmother because of the
Wow.
smell. It had nothing to do with the lady walking by me.
Yeah.
It really had nothing to do with where I was walking, but one
Hmm.
smell transported me to being about 10 years old. So it's just, it's as much as I say, where the hell did I put my keys? And I can't remember that. I can remember
Hmm.
smells from when I was 10, or
Yeah.
music that I listened to in
Yeah.
high school. Yeah, it's
Yeah. It's, I mean, art transcends time and space in a way, which is why we need to create it, right? It's like, it's not just about right now, but it's about how it will be perceived in 100 years, 20 years. And same thing, like how we perceive art, you know, um, from the beginning and to now. It's just like beautiful. I mean, like I love music as well. Like I'm very much influenced outside of just, the physical medium of art, in terms of like also, music and cinema, and it is all encompassing on like how we go about and kind of like move through the world. So for you to say something about like sense, I think that's also really important too. It's just this like, I mean, scent memory is the most close memories that you have. So yeah, I think that's really important to kind of just like, even if you just take a moment to kind of like get yourself back at that point and then just like daydream with that. I think it's like a great part of like having all those five senses is kind of to experience and lead with that. I believe in like creating an immersive space when making a show, for example, making a show happen. So like when I had Girl World's book launch party, it was very much about all the senses. So it is very funny that you say that. And I made sure that I did a little Palo Santo through the space before the show, but also lighting a rose candle in the bathroom and having grapes on the table, and there's all senses of like, and also of course photos on the wall.
sure.
So kind of to have these elements that you're looking with your eyes, you're touching, you're tasting, you're smelling, holds memories a little bit stronger, and it gives you a certain kind of impression about your own memories.
Yeah, you're providing context, and
Yeah.
and I think that by setting up the scene as you did,
Hmm.
you're letting people know, hey, this is kind of the context ultimately of the images you're going to see, but here's the
Hmm.
the bigger context in which those images live. And so
Yeah.
people, as you said, they're immersed in it. So let me ask you I'll call it a Chamber of Commerce question. A
Hmm.
lot of people travel to New York City from all over the country, all over the world, and don't necessarily get to any of the other outer boroughs. So
Hmm.
my question to you photographically is Manhattan, not versus, but compared to Brooklyn.
Hmm.
Photographically, what does Brooklyn offer? I'll say that either
Hmm.
Manhattan doesn't or does in a different way.
The height of buildings.
Okay.
The height of buildings is like definitely the main noticeable difference. I think when you're shooting, see that like neighborhood feel, you feel it. Things are just lower profile. You see the sky a little bit better in skyline photos, even if it's just like, I mean, compared to say Fort Greene or Bed-Stuy, nothing is farther up than like five, 6 stories.
Mhm.
So the photos you take are a lot different. And then that goes, of course, with social interactions. The neighborhood's different. People living there are different. People who are working there are a lot different in terms of like the photos that you'll be taking. I mean, I was living in Bed-Stuy for a few years, and then I came back to Manhattan, and the photos I was taking there are a lot different than Manhattan. I wouldn't say one is better than the other, but it's a different feeling, you know. It's more quiet, way more neighborhood y, like it's just, I mean, Manhattan, there's less space, I would have to say. More crowdedness, tourism, people are just all over the place. Most likely, almost either people are in Manhattan to either A, work, or B, travel, and then they disperse after certain hours. So when you go to Brooklyn, you get a better understanding of who the people are of New York, I think, in my opinion. Same thing with like the Bronx. Same idea, maybe even like Queens as well. So, yeah, if you know, for anyone who's listening, I think it is worth going out to those other boroughs to just experience, you know, experience what different food, different cultures, you know, more affordable real estate, which also opens up more possibilities for something that might be more individual or mom and pop shop, which Manhattan has slowly pushed out. So I think that's also really important to notice too, and acknowledge the fact that all of those independent businesses that shuttered through COVID, you know, there are less and less individualized, personalized shops like there once was. So those other boroughs are kind of where it's at when you're looking for something very specific or something unique. And yeah, I mean, I love all five boroughs, you know. They all cater to something a little bit different, and yeah, go out there, go experience.
Now that's good insight, really good insight. Well, you talked earlier about how long you were working on the book Girl World. So now you find yourself working on another book. So
Mm-hmm.
what can you share about what you're doing in the lab for this next book?
So I'm working with my same publisher, Connotation Press, and we are working on a still life book, very much different tone, subject matter all around. And these are still lives taken on large format, medium format, 35 millimeter, through many years of, you know, composed, organic, and also found objects. So I'm very excited to share this with people. It definitely feels like a big step in my career to have two books out in 1 year.
Yeah.
So I'm I'm thrilled. I'm so thrilled to share it because it also gives people a little bit of insight of how expansive my work is outside of street and documentary.
Now, with the found objects, are these
Mm-hmm.
objects that you're shooting quite literally where they were found, or are you taking a found object and moving it into, you know, like a studio setting or a setting of your choice?
Yeah, I'm taking them in, bringing them in to my apartment, and
Okay.
I create this like it's basically just like whether it be formal, and then there's informal. So
Okay.
there is this very much of a play happening visually. I'm playing, and I'm excited to see what people will have fun with, or you know, bring thoughts or memories out from it, because I think it's also really interesting to talk about how much faces and humans create stories for people and create this like heaviness, and there is no way around it. It's inevitable. But with objects, there is this lightness and openness to be a little bit more free for the audience to kind of fill in what they please, what they want to take from that, what they're experiencing from looking at that. So it's also a fun thing to tell people like, hey, you know, I'm playing with like these colors and compositions. Like, do you see what I see?
Well, and like you said with Girl World, once this book is published and it's out there, it'll be,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to see how people react and what they see,
Yeah.
how similar it was to your thought or different. So now that
Mm-hmm.
you're done with Girl World, do you ever go back and look through the book, or are you kind of, you know, it's out there in the world, you've done what you can
Mm-hmm.
do, and you kind of don't need to go back through it?
I look through it and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of every single image that I decided to put in there. I think about all the time more photos that could have been in there. I've gone through thousands of photos and I ended up in 220 photos. But it's tucked in. It's tucked in. It's all set. I don't need to touch it anymore. And I think that's when it's I can be content with myself. I'm content of what I put out there, and I'm proud of it. I look through it as a way of like, wow, I did the damn thing. I said I was going to do it. I did it, and now it's here. So I think it's also just like, yes, I look through the photos and I pat myself on the back or whatever, but like I look through it more of like as a materialized object or a materialized evidence of my constant art practice, and finally materializing something and being like, hey, this is a body of work. This is one project that encapsulates time, place, subject matter.
Well, and it is so well done. It is just
Thank
it's really
you. I appreciate that.
yeah, it's a terrific book. I know that people are going to want to follow your work, and they're going to
Mm-hmm.
want to potentially purchase the book. For people who
Mm-hmm.
want to stay up on what you're doing, what are the best ways on social media that people can keep up with what you have going on?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram. It's just my name, Kat Byrnes. I also have a painting Instagram called Kat Byrnes Art. And yeah, you can stay tuned. My website is katburns.com. You can order the book through there. You can get it at the Leica store in New York. You can get it at Shop Sunny in Luzerne, Pennsylvania. That's like northeastern PA. It's also in Paris. It's at the Photographers Gallery in London. Yeah.
No, that sounds great. Well, I really appreciate you being a guest on the show, and it's been absolutely fantastic talking with you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I'm happy that you asked me.
And I want to also thank our listeners for joining us. As you know, we release new episodes on the 1st and 15th of every month. If you want to hear what I have going on or take a look, you can check out what I'm doing on Instagram at Mitch Stringer Images, and of course online at mitchstringerimages.com. Until next time you join us, I wish you great light. I wish you happy shooting, and talk with you soon. Take care.